Zane here, aka Mr. Armageddon, and today I'm bringing you the HP Spectre x360 15T. This is the Gym Cut edition, which is the newest 15-inch refresh from HP as of March 2019. In this video, we're going to look at the specs for the refresh, take a look inside the unit, run some benchmarks, and even check eGPU compatibility utilizing the Thunderbolt 3 ports. For a basic rundown of specifications, we have an Intel Core i7 8750H, which is a 6-core, 45-watt CPU. So no more Ultrabook CPUs in this version. This is a mobile workstation class processor, and on paper it should be a pretty powerful laptop or desktop replacement. For dedicated graphics, we have an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1050 Ti, utilizing the Max-Q design with 4 GB of dedicated video memory, a 15-inch 4K anti-glare micro-edge touch display. I'm not really sure how they specify this as a anti-glare display, as it's pretty glossy, but that's what the website says. We have a 6-cell 85 watt-hour battery, which HP claims to be an all-day battery, and the unit also ships with a 135 watt power adapter utilizing a barrel plug. Note, it will charge with a standard USB Type-C power adapter, but more on that later in the video. Options for the memory are 8 to 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, which is unfortunately not removable. Options for storage range from 256 gigabytes to 2 terabytes of NVMe M.2 SSD. Port-wise, we have 2x Thunderbolt 3 ports with a full 4 lanes, which we'll test with the eGPU later in the video. A single USB 3.1 Type A port, HDMI, a micro SD card reader, and a 3.5mm headphone/microphone combo jack. We also have a backlit keyboard with a 10 keypad, a fingerprint reader, and Windows Hello utilizing a built-in infrared camera. The webcam has a neat addition in this model, which is a kill switch that essentially disables the webcam for those who are security conscious. Note, this only disables the video, not the audio. For more detailed specifications, hit up the product link in the video description. One thing I wanted to note about this version is it is currently only available from HP's website, starting at $1,599. The version Best Buy sells has a slower Ultrabook CPU and the MX150 graphics. Now, configuration-wise, this version is the 16 gigabyte model with the 256 gigabyte NVMe drive, which I'm going to go ahead and upgrade to a 1 terabyte Samsung drive later in this video. I also went with the Poseidon blue color and will compare it to the dark ash silver color that my previous generation Spectre has. Now, with the specs out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at what comes in the box and then what changes HP made to the exterior with this version. And here we have the unboxing of the Spectre x360 15T. As mentioned before, I did select the Poseidon blue color, and so you can kind of see that as we pull it out here. And here we have the active stylus that ships in the box. It is powered by N-Tray technology and works pretty great for drawing and taking notes. This is the power adapter that ships with the HP Spectre 15T. Is a 135 watt power adapter utilizing a proprietary barrel plug. And again, this is because a standard USB Type-C power adapter only supplies at a max of 100 watts. And this is the sleeve that ships with the unit. It's just a very basic protection for sliding inside your bag to limit scratches on the device. So great that it's free, but not going to provide any protection if it were to fall. Now let's take a quick look at the ports we mentioned before. So first off, we have the micro SD card reader, USB 3.1 Type A, USB Type-C Thunderbolt, another USB Type-C Thunderbolt on the angled back, and then this is that cool webcam kill switch we talked about earlier. Along the back we have that nice gym cut design and some fairly strong hinges as well. On the other side we have our 3.5mm headphone/microphone port, a full-size HDMI, and that barrel plug adapter for power, along with the power button along that angled back. And that's a pretty cool design choice there, and so far I'm really liking the positioning of both the power button and that other USB Type-C port. And although the construction is still CNC aluminum chassis, the gym cut design really looks awesome. I love the way it looks, and I'm glad that HP made that design choice for this year's model. And opening her up, we have a good-sized keyboard backlit, pretty good-sized trackpad, and then the fingerprint reader over here on the right. Now the Spectre is a 15-inch device, and it's not the lightest of laptops, but it's not horrible for what it provides, coming in at about 4.81 pounds, and at a max thickness of about 0.76 inches or 20.7 millimeters. The 4K UHD display is great. It covers the full sRGB color gambit and gets pretty bright at about 298 nits. It's not the brightest out there, but it's pretty decent. It's also very glossy, which is, again, strange because HP lists on their website as this being an anti-glare screen. Now, as far as the speakers, we have a quad speaker configuration with a dedicated audio amp, which allows you to go up to 100% volume without distortion. For a laptop, it sounds pretty good. And here's a comparison between the new 2019 Gem-Cut Spectre on the right and my older 2017 Spectre on the left. You can see the older version did not have the 10 key, and for me that was a huge thing to get it in the new one. And also you can see the difference here between the dark ash silver color and the Poseidon blue. So really digging the blue. I'm glad that we went with that choice as an option for this year. Speaker location is changed because the 10 key design moving to the top from the sides. So overall, I'm really happy with the changes they made in this year's version, and I think it looks better because of it. Now it's time to take a look on the inside of the HP Spectre 15T. I'm going to replace the solid state drive with a new one. Alright, so in order to remove the cover on the newer Spectres, there's actually you only see 2 screws visible, but there's in fact a total of 8 screws. There are more located underneath these rubber feet that we have to remove from the bottom of the laptop. So doing so is pretty easy. So these 2 exterior screws are T5. So that's what we're going to utilize to get these out. You can see that one's got a hefty amount of Loctite on it, the blue Loctite. And now we use a spludger to remove the plastic foot. We'll try and keep this nice and clean so we can just reuse the existing double-sided tape that's on it. Alright, then here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Phillips head screws. It looks like they're M2 size and roughly 9 millimeters in length. And they do have a manual, an operations manual online where it has the instructions on how to do this. It's really straightforward. It's just, just like any laptop, you're pulling screws and using a plastic tool to pry it and pop it open. Alright, so now we have the screws off. They recommend going in from the front of the device. There's a seam right here that shouldn't be too hard to get into. Make sure you don't have any micro SD cards in the slot when you do this as well, as that can cause some issue. Alright, and there's the lid. We'll place that over to the side. And here we have our internal components. And so what we're doing today is essentially replacing this NVMe storage drive with a 1 terabyte Samsung Evo 970. Doing the upgrade through HP was a little bit more than I wanted to spend. I was able to save about $100 just by purchasing my own and swapping it. Again, I've already done a full system backup using a Cronus, and so I'll just reflash the drive as is. And honestly, I don't know if I'm going to keep the standard HP install. I might just wipe it and start with the fresh Windows 10 install. We'll see how much bloatware there is once I have a chance to dig in a bit more. I'm going to pop that out. And you can see the stock one that it comes with is a 256 gigabyte NVMe and this one is Toshiba. So the last year's model was actually a Samsung drive. So now they're using Toshiba drives. And I'll get a good picture of that, good close up. And then we're just installing the finishing touches on getting this larger 1 terabyte drive in the system, and then pulling off that shroud that kind of covers some of the other components in the heat pipes here. So that's the procedure for removing the bottom plate to upgrade your SSD. And as mentioned before, make sure you get the 16 gigabyte version, as you cannot upgrade the RAM on a later date, being that it's soldered in place. So that's kind of a bummer, but it is what it is. And then here we have a pretty good size, 85 watt-hour battery. And then here you can see 2 of the down-firing speakers on the bottom, 2 of the 4 that this laptop has total, the other 2 being up top. Now, cooling-wise, you can see this thing has 2 heat pipes and 2 cooling fans, 1 for the CPU, 1 for the GPU, and it actually does a pretty decent job, which you'll see here a little bit farther in the video, of keeping this thing cool compared to previous versions of the Spectre. So that's it for the disassembly. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop the lid back on, install Windows, and run some benchmarks. So for the benchmarking process here, we're going to not only benchmark the new HP Spectre 2019 Gem-Cut Edition, I'm also going to compare it against the 2017 version of the Spectre, which has the MX150 GPU, which is still being sold by HP if you buy this machine from Best Buy. And we're also going to plug in an eGPU that has the new RTX 2060 from NVIDIA and test that running both with the internal laptop display and then again using an external display. And we're going to compare all 4 of those scenarios against some benchmarks here. And for the synthetic benchmarks, we're going to go ahead and run 3D Mark Firestrike and TimeSpy, superposition using a few different settings. And then to finish up the synthetics, we'll run Geekbench, testing the CPU single and multi-core, and as well as the GPU compute. As far as the gaming benchmarks, I've gone ahead and went with Apex Legends at a 1080p setting, mostly high with a mix of medium, Shadow of War at 1080p on high settings, and Ashes of the Singularity at 1080p with the GPU focus setting. So let's get to it. And just to show I'm not blowing smoke, this is a Gigabyte of Horus gaming box with the RTX 2060 installed. It didn't come that way, but I put one inside of it, and it runs perfectly over the Thunderbolt 3 port. Again, all 4 lanes are being utilized, and we're getting some good results. So on to some numbers. Okay, so here we have 3D Mark, again running both Firestrike and TimeSpy. And essentially what we're seeing here is that the new 1050 Ti compared to the older version, which is the MX150, is essentially twice the GPU performance. So that's good to see there. Happy about those results. The surprising thing within these tests, and that it really shows the move from the mobile ultrabook processor to the kind of the mobile workstation class processor, is the CPU score is almost 3x what the previous version was carrying. So let's see if that continues through with the rest of these tests. And here we have superposition. So again, I tested using 4 different settings here. So we have 1080p medium, high, and extreme, and then also 4K optimized. And again, this essentially we're seeing the same thing. The 1050 Ti doubles the score of the MX150, and then utilizing an eGPU with an RTX 2060, it's double the 1050 Ti. One interesting thing to note as well is that when running an internal display versus an external display, you do get another 15% bump in performance if using an external display via like an HDMI out versus the laptop's internal display. So just food for thought if using an eGPU. And for our last group of benchmarks here, first up we have Geekbench. Again, on the single core, we see a pretty decent bump. It's almost 2x of what the original Spectre was getting. The biggest difference, though, is definitely going to be in your CPU multi-core performance. Moving from a quad-core to a 6-core workstation-class CPU gains about 3x performance. So that was something I wasn't expecting, but very, very happy to see. And then with the GPU compute score, essentially the same we've seen across the board here, 2x performance over the MX150. And last here we have Apex Legends. So we wrangled in about 45 FPS, again at 1080p on kind of high medium settings. Shadow of War around 54 FPS, 1080p high settings. And then Ashes of Singularity roughly 60 FPS, 1080p with the GPU focus settings. So again, we're seeing the same 2x improvement over the MX 150, even when testing in actual gaming settings here. So that's great to see. Again, using an external GPU nets even more, but as far as the actual laptop is concerned, the internal graphics do a pretty decent job for some moderate gaming at 1080p, especially if you bump it down to like medium settings. Almost any new title should play just fine with those settings applied. So now that we've run some benchmarks, let's talk about heat and fan noise. And I will say that I was actually fairly impressed with the heat dissipation of this newer Spectre, mainly because my older 2017 version gets pretty hot and gets very noisy. So with this newer one, I noticed that the fans aren't near as loud as the previous version, and it's noticeably cooler to the touch, despite having better hardware, more powerful hardware. So essentially what we saw at the bottom of the laptop near the trackpad, whereas the 2017 version registered 38C, the newer Spectre only came in at 34C, so that's not too bad at all. Top near the hinge, where things get a lot toastier, the 2017 version was hitting 51C, and I'm only registering about 45C on the newer Spectre. Again, not super low, but much better than the old version. But the biggest difference is that although this still gets hot, it's not near as loud. The fans are noticeable, but not very loud. Also, I didn't notice any thermal throttling during my test, which is good to see. And one thing I did want to make note of, so even though it does have it went back to having this proprietary charging brick with this barrel plug, the 135 watt delivery, which is required because it has a more powerful GPU, I guess. It still will take a charge via a normal USB Type-C charging brick. So if I plug this in over here, you will see the orange indicator pop up. And actually it's not orange, it's white because it's fully charged. If it was drained a bit, it'd be orange, but it does take a full charge. I don't get any error pop-up saying, this adapter's not powerful enough. Obviously your battery will start to decline a bit if you're using like a 65 watt adapter, but in a pinch, it'll work just fine. The last thing I wanted to make a mention of in regards to the power brick. So this is the power brick for last year's version of the Spectre. It's a 90 watt over USB Type-C, and this is the new one, the 135 watt, uses this barrel plug. And I don't know what kind of magic they did here, but you can see the new one is considerably thinner than the older generations. Even though this delivers a lot more wattage, it's actually a smaller power brick. So traveling with it and whatnot, this is going to be a little better. It's quite a bit lighter too, just smaller and lighter. So that's great that they were able to do that. So back to my earlier note you may have seen pop up when I was talking about the chargers. So although this machine will charge without issue using a 65 watt, 90 watt, even 100 watt USB Type-C charger, if you're plugged in while gaming, you will get a drop in GPU performance if you're not using the 135 watt barrel plug. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that here. Alright, so right now I'm running with the 135 watt adapter that ships with the Spectre, and I'm at 60 frames per second pretty consistently, no issues at all. Now if I take this out, first off, running on battery, my frames drop down to 29, 30, so instant reduction in frame rate. And on top of that, if I take a 65 watt USB Type-C adapter, although it does show that it's charging, I get the little light that comes on over here. Again, my FPS is still reduced to roughly that 30, in between 25 to 30 frames per second. You can see right here, this little window. Even though these other USB-C Type-C chargers will work, they don't provide enough wattage, and the GPU is basically underclocking itself because of that. Now I'm going to try a 90 watt USB Type-C and see if I get the same results. Alright, so 90 watt is the same. Yep, still looking at like in between 20 to 30 frames per second at these graphic settings. So again, it's undervolting the GPU. And if I go back to the 135 watt barrel plug, instantly my frame rates go back up to 60. Just food for thought if you're traveling. Make sure you travel, if you're planning on doing any gaming or video editing, stuff like that, make sure you have the original adapter. Otherwise, you're not going to get the full performance that this machine is capable of. So to wrap this video up, overall I am very pleased with the new Spectre 15T. The new look of both the gem cut edges and the Poseidon blue color make for a great combo, and honestly I think you would be hard pressed to find a better looking laptop anywhere at this time. Performance-wise, it actually exceeded my expectations, and I was very pleased with the numbers we've seen here today. It will be a great upgrade for me as my primary travel computer for work. Now, I didn't really hit on the 2-in-1 features of this device, but they only add to the list of things that make the new Spectre 15T top of its class. Now, if there's something that I didn't cover that you guys would like to know more about, hit me in the comments. Happy to run more tests or look into anything you might have. And as always, thanks for watching.